Three, two, one. Welcome to the Lightforge podcast. This is Adwicta.
This is Merps. Hope you guys have had a good week. Let us talk about the patch. We got some stuff.
A lot of stuff happening. It happened early in the week, and it feels like so long ago. But really, we did not even know that what was going to be in the patch when we last were doing this podcast last week. So yeah, let's do a rundown. We're gonna do Arena first, and then Battlegrounds. So we're gonna talk about the changes in the patch, and then we're gonna discuss Arena. Then we're gonna go back and talk about the changes in the patch and Battlegrounds, and discuss Battlegrounds. So I'm gonna run over the changes to cards that don't matter first. Incanter's Flow is 3 mana now. Il'gynoth went from a 4 mana 2/6 lifesteal. Your lifesteal damages enemy heroes instead of healing you. That's Demon Hunter Legendary. To 6 mana 4/8 lifesteal. Same thing. Just they added +2/+2 to it and made it 2 mana bigger. You're gonna see that as a pattern here, where they just raise the mana cost of cards and give a +1/+1, which makes the card worse. At least in the arena. But the point of all this is constructed driven as usual, and they're trying to slow the game down a bit without like totally destroying any decks. So next change, same thing. Dark Glare. You guys remember Dark Glare? It's a 2 mana 2/3. After your hero takes damage, refresh a mana crystal. That's now a 3 mana 3/4. Same thing. It's a Warlock card. Battlegrounds Battlemaster. We're going to put a pin in that and come back to it because it's really more or less the only thing that matters here. Kokar Pact Runner, which we featured in our deck on last Arena Coup. It's a 2 mana 2/3 Hunter. After you cast a spell, summon a 1/1 Hyena with Rush. So pretty OP. Now it's a 3 mana 3/4 with the same ability, which honestly might make it better in Arena, just because 3 mana 3/4s is so much better than 2 mana 2/3s.
Uh I don't know if I agree with that. Just because the ability was really good, and the fact that with this minion, even though it's vanilla statted, I found that I used the ability a ton.
Mm-hmm.
It was really pretty broken in arena, and not just for like aggro hunter, which let's face it doesn't really work right now. It's best in that sort of like mid-range hunter where you're at least controlling the board, and it's like having a second desert spear almost, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're just able to get all of this exact damage. And I found that the cheapness of the card really worked in its favor. Not that it's getting a huge nerf or anything, because it keeps stats, but I do anticipate that it's going to be a little bit more awkward to use. And part of the reason why I like this card so much was I was able to blow out games on, like, or at least start the snowball on turn two, or blow it out starting on turn three. So this is definitely going to hurt a little bit. Like, I'm thinking of a lot of the plays that I was able to do just on turn two and then following up on turn three with this thing, and you're just not able to do it anymore. But overall impact, it's not huge, but it is a little bit disappointing to see.
Okay. I don't really have any opinions about this change, but it is an effect in the arena because this is a very popular card in the arena, and it for good reason has over 60% win rate right now. You can't track the win rates on this because the patch also came with the offering odds adjust, which made Hunter the number 2 class in the meta right now. So all the win rates have gone up. So this win rate has gone up too, but that doesn't really mean anything. Okay. Moving on from that, we have another nerf. This one to Shaman, Granite Forgeborn. Granite Forgeborn. It was a 4 mana 4/5 elemental with Battlecry. Reduce the cost of elementals in your hand and deck by 1. It's just kind of a ridiculous card. Even though in Arena you're not going to get that many elemental synergies, it's still just a flat out bonus that you will be able to use in pretty much every deck, at least somewhat. Now it's a 4 mana 4/4, which makes it a lot worse in Arena. Then you have the nerf to Conviction, the Paladin card that buffs +3 attack to a random minion on a random friendly minion on the board, also known as your minion with initiative. It's now 2 mana, so it was like pretty good in Arena. Not even like totally busted, not even premium, just like good. Now it's not good. So stop picking this card if you were picking this card before. It's not unpickable, but it's not a good card. Take a Yeti over it.
It's much more deck dependent now. In the right deck, it could still be devastating. Like, but it is definitely one where if you're picking it in the draft, especially because remember, like with draft, you got to be a little bit safer. Like, you might pick this off of like snack run, right? Sometimes,
or you might
because
pick it at the end of a
so
draft when you
Yeah,
know you
yeah,
have
at
a
the end
very
of the
aggressive
draft.
board centric deck.
But this is now a much tougher pick earlier on in the draft. It's just like something like what Rigged Fair Game. I think that's an example of a card in Mage that I rarely draft. But how many times do you actually pick a Rigged Fair Game off of Ring Toss or off of that 4-mana 2/2 that gives you a secret, right?
Yeah.
You'll
so
pick
often.
it sometimes. It just like with Conviction, a lot of times you'll see the position you are in game and you'll pick it. But in the draft, you're like, oh, I don't know. That's a little bit iffy here. So that's where it's at. And previously, Conviction was just pretty good.
Yeah.
Like it was just really, I could toss it in almost any sort of deck and be pretty happy about a Blessing of Might at least. Now I'm like, oh yikes! You definitely start thinking of the randomness. You start thinking of the cost. It gets really dicey.
Yep. And with it, because this was one of the 1-mana holy spells, all of your holy spell synergies got a little weaker. And there's quite a lot of holy spell synergies, especially in Paladin. So that's something else to think about. And finally, one last change: Flesh Giant was an 8-mana 8/8, cost 1 less for each time your hero's health changed during your turns. Now it's a 9-mana 8/8. Was never a huge problem in Arena and still will not be a huge problem. But it's yeah, I mean it's just kind of, it's a little worse than it was before. Because I was about to say, oh, you lose the ability to play it as an 8-mana 8/8, but no one's playing it as an 8-mana 8/8. They're all playing it like later on. So it would be like, it used to be a 9-mana 8/8 that drew a card. Now it's a 10-mana 8/8 that draws a card.
All right.
Okay, so going back to the one change that really mattered in the arena is Battlegrounds Battlemaster. You notice a lot of these changes, they raised the mana and then they added some stats to it. Battlegrounds Battlemaster was a 5-mana 5/5 that adjacent minions had Wind Fury. They could have made it into a 6-mana 6/6 adjacent minions have Wind Fury. They did not. They straight up nerfed this to a 6-mana 5/5 adjacent minions have Wind Fury, which is a very interesting decision because in theory, having it be a 6/6 should not matter that much. But they felt the need to be extra harsh on this card. And they probably felt the need to be extra harsh on this card because it is a neutral. And because, like, you know, we rated it low A tier. Like, it's not, neutrals aren't supposed to be there. At a 6-mana 6/6, it probably becomes a B plus instead of an A, honestly. But it's still, maybe still a low A tier. It probably wouldn't matter that much, but it does make it like significantly worse. But at a 6-mana 5/5, this card is now, like, it's still a good card. You'd still take it over a Yeti. But it's now no longer a premium card. So the ability,
like what, a C plus?
Yeah, like a C plus, maybe a low B, but yeah, a C plus, low B, somewhere around there. And it's just, from a design perspective, I could totally see why they nerfed this card to the ground. I made a tweet about it after this nerf came out because I was like, oh, this is going to be one of them that we quote unquote miss. But that's because Blizzard don't nerf cards for Arena, where we rate it as our top card of the set, and we say that this should not be in the Arena, whether it should get nerfed or it should just get removed from Arena specifically. And I tracked it. I forgot what the stats were, but I think like we called for the removal of a card pre-release, like from the Arena, or strongly suggested it, right? Like 7 times, and 5 of those were either actually removed from the Arena or they were like nerfed. So if we're saying a card is number 1 overall just by its like value, its computed value, right, in our algorithm, And then we, on top of that, like using our brains, not an algorithm, look at it and say, well, this is causing swings or like weird stuff that just really shouldn't belong in the arena. Then that card's going to be problematic, even for constructed, most of the time. Like, that's what that history tells me. Which is interesting, because you think arena and constructed, especially on neutrals, have nothing to do with each other. But when cards are too powerful, they're really too powerful. And especially if they're too powerful in more like interesting ways, right? And this is definitely a super interesting way that this card is too powerful.
Yeah, with Battlemaster, one of the problems was not like, the power by itself. It's the ability to blow people out, to do things that you couldn't really do before, and especially in this meta in which you don't have as much initiative, so what you can do with the Battlemaster is even more pronounced. And it's still there. That's kind of the issue with it. So it's still there. You just won't see it that often because people don't draft it as often, and your standard deviation of the effect of Battlemaster when you drop it, the lows are much lower. The highs are still the same. It's just the lows are so freaking low now, and that's really the issue. But does that solve a problem? I mean, it depends
It
on
makes it better.
your opinion. Like, yeah, that depends on your definition of solve. But no, not really, because it's still out there, and people are still going to draft it sometimes. They will still get it sometimes randomly as well, and they're going to chunk you down. So if you're saying a problem is solved because you just don't see it that often, like for example,
Ysera.
Ysera or Blackwing, although you do see Ysera.
Yeah, I was about to say Blackwing you really don't see. You're going to see Battlemaster more often than Ysera even. Definitely not at Blackwing levels.
Yeah, but when we get to these problematic cards, it's like if they just reduce the offering rate of something like Ysera, does that solve the problem? No. Like some people may say yes, but no. Some people will just say no. And I'm one of those people that is like, no, because I just don't like the fact that it's like, oh, instead of getting hit with it once every 10 games, you get hit with it once every 25 games, and that should be okay. I just don't think that kind of stuff really belongs in the arena, but
it's Hearthstone.
Once again,
it's Casino Stone. You just gotta write off that X% as like, oh, that happened? Okay, well, I lose. Having nothing to do with my skill or my opponent's skill. And that's okay. Because it's Hearthstone. So when they lower the percentages, it's always going to make the game better. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The fact that this card is still in the game doesn't solve it. This is not a nerf. Like, I'm thinking the old school nerfs, right? Like, some of the first cards we called to be removed was Bone Mare, and then Giggling Inventor like a year after that. Because back then neutral cards were just like not that crazy when it came out. I think Primordial Drake I called to be removed and you didn't, so that we had like a split on that. Like when they raised the mana of Bone Mare, it became kind of just a really good neutral for the time rather than broken. When they upped Giggling Inventor 2 mana, it was still better than a Yeti. But not by much, and it solved the problem. Like at 7 mana in Arena at the time, having a Giggling Inventor out was kind of a normal, decent like thing that you can do. But when you have cards that just do more crazy stuff, like think Watch Post, right? Even like if they change some stuff about it, but made it remain toxic if you draw it on turn 3, it doesn't quote unquote solve the problem. You're still going to have a design issue. You just minimized the amount of times that the design issue comes into play. So if anything, Battlegrounds Battlemaster has an even bigger design issue now. Because before it was at least a 5 mana 5/5. Now it's a 6 mana 5/5. So you polarized even more. Merps was talking about the floor drop down, right? That's a big design problem if you're thinking of it in terms of a card design for the arena. But because people aren't going to pick it anywhere near as often as they did before, and honestly, because people were not being offered it and were not picking it that often to begin with. I'll talk about that later with more offering odd stuff. Yeah, so like Battlemaster, I lost to Battlemaster 2 out of the 3 times it was played against me in the 2 nights that I played Arena during this new meta. That was more often than I've lost to Battlemaster, or that was a higher frequency per game that I've lost to Battlemaster than pre-expansion. I mean, than pre-patch. And that's not because people are picking Battlemaster more, or somehow Battlemaster got better after the nerf, but my theory on this, I do have a theory on why I'm losing to Battlemaster more, is that remember when we talked about Battlemaster before, and I said it is almost never the right choice to play Battlemaster on 5, and so many players are doing it. Well, now, Blizzard kind of made it impossible for you to misplay Battlemaster. So now, whenever you do see a Battlemaster, it's forcing players to play Battlemaster to its biggest advantage. So, yeah, the card definitely got significantly worse because it's no longer a backup 5-drop and because it just eats up one of your extra mana later. It's causing average players to play the card in a more intelligent way, not needing to use their own intelligence, of which, they only have so much of, but by removing the bad options. So I think that's going to be one of these effects where maybe you see Battlemaster less than you saw Battlemaster before, but you're going to see it used right more often than not. And that's even worse, because when a Battlemaster is used wrong, it doesn't do much. You've kind of just neutered a super good card. But a nerfed version of the Battlemaster used right, that's potentially even better. The other thing with Battlemaster and why you just don't see it a lot is that it's kind of a complicated card. A lot of players won't want to pick it. You see that with a number of cards. Like a lot of cards that hurt yourself, players just don't pick it for some reason, even though it's really good. Cards that mill your own cards, people just don't like it, even though its win rates are insanely good. Like the Banshee. The Banshee always had ridiculously good win rates, even by average players. But the average players still weren't picking them because they just don't like the feeling of milling their own cards, I guess. And I feel like Battlemaster is going to end up closer to that. Obviously not as good as Banshee, and anywhere close to a Banshee. The card's value definitely dropped down. But that's why we're not like this card hasn't dropped to below a Yeti at all. Not even close. It's a C+ or even a low B still, because you're still giving 2 of your minions win theory. This is a game ender. This is a bloodlust. It's a 6 mana neutral bloodlust that has some other applicable traits. It's still a freaking insane card. So yeah. Okay. Let's talk about those are all the changes in Arena that happened on the card side, but they also hit the button, which means all the classes got readjusted, the offering odds got readjusted. And before we dig into the actual class readjustments, one thing that we've talked about a little, but we haven't really focused on too much about it, it's that sometime in, I think this is when, what was the last mini expansion? I forget what it was called. The last mini expansion?
The Caves?
The Caves, yeah. When that came out, they changed the offering rates so that epics for certain sets appeared as often as commons or rares or whatever. And so you saw a spike in all these epic cards. And that hasn't gone away with the new sets. And so you are seeing a lot more epics than we did months ago, but it really hasn't changed since the previous metas. Since the shift happened. If you're wondering why you see so many clowns being offered and rabbits, that's why. So just keep it in mind, epics are not really that epic anymore. But in terms of the actual class balance that Blizzard intended to do, Blizzard messed this one up really bad. There's no two ways about it. If you just look at the numbers, Druid was below 55%. Now Warlock is above 55%. The lowest class, Priest, was an unplayable 42%. Druid is now 40%. Warrior's
It's been falling.
43%.
I don't know if 40% is the floor here. I'm not sure. As in, it keeps going down. I wouldn't be surprised if it just kept going down. And if you go and look at Druids and just click on it, you see exactly why. Druids used to have above 40% kind of appearance rate index for Arbor Up. I forget exactly what it was. It was like close-ish to 50% at one point. Now it's below 25%. So this once again, please never call it micro adjust ever again.
I
These
didn't use that word
seismic
this entire podcast.
Yes, I understand. This isn't for you. This is for all of us out there. And I think people are better at it. Like I've seen people on Arena HS, and that term micro adjust. I mean, I think everyone knows how laughable it is now.
Mm-hmm.
But it went from
I don't know if Blizzard even calls it micro adjust anymore. I think
I
they
don't
just
think
call
they
it
do.
like balance adjust or something.
Right. Because I think even they've seen throughout the years, like these are seismic
Mm-hmm.
changes. It is just like we crown you, and then just like with any good revolution or something, they just like kill off the king, right? Like they
Yep.
kill off the king. And druids are unplayable now because you not only kill Arbor Up, you're killing like all of these class cards, the good class cards, like we saw with Park Panther, Druid of the Plains, all of these good things. And they also killed the good neutral cards as well, which not too surprising. A lot of the good neutral cards, like Scorpid and Importer, generate these things
Yeah.
if you didn't have it before. So it's almost like a double whammy nowadays. Like the good classes not only get the good class cards, but they also get more Scorpids to generate more of these good class cards. Druids just got hit so hard. They were, I think, at
Brutal.
like, yeah, 40, about 45% appearance rate of an Arbor Up naturally in a deck. Now they're sub 25%. So they just got slammed. And there's there's no way for you to play around it really, draft like, oh yeah, there's some secret tech here. There just isn't. Like, there's no way for you to finesse this. We don't have buckets anymore, so there's no way for you to kind of play around with everything. You draft Druid, you are going to lose. That's basically it. We see similar things with Warrior at a 43%, but Druid is the one
Yeah.
that was at the top for the longest time. And I understand some people are like, screw Druid. I prefer not to see them for quite a while. But this is also kind of tiring. It's almost as if you might as well just do it like they do in BGs and take it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just take it out, prevent noobs from picking Druid. Like, imagine playing this game without HS Replay, without listening to the podcast, without like watching streams, without going to Arena HS, without doing all of this stuff. You do a couple runs every single week. You understand, you're like, wow, the Druid is really good. And then you've just drafted a couple Druids, you're like, God, I am so unlucky. Like, how am I so unlucky? Because you are incredibly unlucky. You never get those Arbor Ups anymore. You never get Park Panthers. You never get any of those. That must really suck. If you spend cash, or if you through your
Mm-hmm.
quests and your progression get gold. Um, it just really does suck. And if you're going to nerf to this extent, I'm like, just do it like they do in BG. Just take out
Yeah.
Druid.
Yeah. 'Cause, like, okay, if you're at 54%, right, and now you're at 40%, that means you've overcorrected for the problem more than doubly. That's how bad you were at estimating the effects of your like decisions. More than doubly. So like, I don't know. Imagine if I wanted to lose 10 pounds and and then I lost 25 pounds. Like that. Like that's you know the
I cannot
equivalent.
imagine that.
Like it's
Literally
just,
cannot.
if you ever tried losing weight and you're aiming for 10 and you get 25, that's a crazy thing. Now imagine that the extra ones are like just actually bad, not just like good. I wanted to lose more weight. It's it's kind of inconceivable how bad they've made it. It also it also gets harder and harder. Like, as a class gets, like, if you made the class super, super, super bad, its win rate is still not going to be like 0 or like 20%. It's still going to have some percentage of win rates, because eventually you're going to just face potatoes, and that's going to, you know, boost your win rate up on average. So the problem at 40% is actually so much worse than it seems. I don't know how they did it. Like, I don't know how they thought that this was an okay thing to do. And I was always someone who said that druids are actually better than their win rate suggests right now, like when druid was at the top. But this is crazy. This is a crazy nerf. It's a crazy nerf to warriors too. Both of them got crazy nerfed. On top of that, your third class also got crazy nerfed. Or also got nerfed was Demon Hunter. But they're still doing fine for some reason. They're at 49.1%. That's like a decent nerf for the third class. And from Blizzard's perspective, remember for the last Lightforge podcast, we talked about the top 4 classes, because there was actually 4 top classes. It was Druid, Demon Hunter, Druid, Warrior, Demon Hunter, and Warlock. Those were your top 4 classes. We talked about them because they all had roughly similar win rates before there was a huge jump in win rates for the other classes below them. Blizzard decided to nerf 3 of them and not touch the 4th one. No idea why. Their stats must have been very different than HS Replay win rate stats. But predictably, after they did that, the class remaining that was almost just as good as all the other classes, but was not touched, became number 1, and that's Warlock. And not only did Warlock become number 1, it's a problematic 55% number 1. It's not like, oh, it's slightly number 1. The second closest one is Hunter at 53.6%, which was also untouched. And Paladin was also untouched, and that's 51.8%. The 4 classes that they actually buffed, Mage is at 51.2%, so I guess I'm glad we're doing the Arena Coup of Mage this week. It could have gone horribly wrong. So it's like success, right? Like, you don't want to buff things too much. Shaman is at 49%. Like, okay, slightly under buffed, but that's fine. Priest, which everyone thought was like, oh my god, no, they're buffing Priest is going to be insane. I was always skeptical of that, given what the meta is. But Priest is 47.8%. So Priest is still not doing so hot. And Rogue is 46.6%. So Rogue is actually doing kind of bad. Of course, you have to go down another 3.6% to get to Warrior. So Warrior and Druid are really just like not in the game. Like, please don't touch them. I don't know. They have not messed up a micro adjust so bad in quite some time. Like, micro adjusts usually, almost always, micro adjusts make things at least statistically more even. Sorry, not micro adjust, class adjust. Make things statistically more even when it comes to class win rates, because that is their goal. That is their explicit purpose. They're not exactly meant to make the meta better. They're meant to make it so that you have roughly equal chances of win rate when you click each one of the classes to select it, so you can actually pick the one you want and not necessarily just the best one. I don't know what's happened to their algorithm. I don't know what's happened to all their stuff that they were doing it. So the adjustments are never perfect. In fact, they are often surprisingly bad, but they never made the problem worse. Or I think that happens like once every, like, I don't know, 6 times, 7 times they push the button, and this is one of those times. So yeah, that's how the class balance is shaking out right now. Do you have any comments on the class balance before I talk about the meta overall? Because the meta is actually shifted.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
So, because of what Blizzard has done, the meta has totally shifted. This is not the same meta as it was the last week. And the meta is now... Remember, last week we called it the tempo meta. Well, now the meta is a even more tempo meta. You have created a race to the bottom when it comes to tempo. I was actually very scared when they did the nerfs, because I'm like, well, Warlock's clearly going to be number 1 if they nerf the 3 top classes and left the 3 of the 4 top classes and left Warlock alone. Obviously, and lo and behold, Warlock was number 1, because that was a dumb thing for them to do, and anyone should have been able to tell before they actually hit the button. But I thought Warlock was going to play roughly the same way as what Warlock did previously. Because remember, Warlocks didn't have an adjustment, right? Like they left Warlock alone. So if you leave Warlock alone, it should have the same freaking decks that it had before, right? That's not like a weird thing. Okay. Well, that hasn't actually happened. Warlock decks are now much more zoo than control. Whereas before, successful Warlock decks were flip the board kind of metas. Now, Warlock decks are usually more zoo, even though the top cards are still the flip the board cards. And the top cards are not really being seen less frequently than they were before, with the exception of Entitled Customer, which didn't move. So more people are playing Warlock right now. So if you just click a random Warlock card, like say Bloodbound Imp, you see its you'll see its usage rates and win rates kind of go up. Entitled Customer not as much. I don't know if it's just because it's a rarer card or something. But rather than having this large gap in Warlock between the board clear cards at the very top and the other Warlock good cards after that, the gap has now narrowed to be like 0.5%, which reflects this huge shift in the meta. Everybody is going so fast now that people are dying. Even Warlocks are dying before they get to turn 6 Entitled Customer and Rift Cleaver. Or to the extent they get to those cards, they can't successfully flip the board, right? They're like close enough to dead that the Warlock can't like really come back from it. Because remember, if you get the Warlock down to like 10 health, even if the Warlock retakes the board, as long as you have enough cards to finish them off, they can't hero power anymore, they can't do whatever, they're in a very bad spot. So, the pressure has been really raised on the tempo side, and you can tell when you just draft a normal deck these days. If you don't curve out, you pretty much lose. If you do curve out, you're probably still. I've tried drafting decks that were so low on the curve, and I would still lose by tempo and not card advantage. It's just whatever, because they changed the offer rates of so many cards, and the class composition has changed so much that I don't know what exactly is driving it compared to before, because Druid and Warriors both used to play very tempo heavy games, but I guess they're not like as tempo heavy as Hunter and Paladin and like possibly Zoo Warlock. So now a even faster style of deck is taking over the meta, and everyone's kind of reacting to it. So my advice is to go a little more mid-rangey than the very fastest, but if you find yourself losing a lot to tempo, then you know that you're not going low enough, right? The way to beat a deck is always to be a little bit slower than the prevailing deck. And right now, your normal like 5 to 6 2s, 4 to 5 3s, 4 4s, you know, maybe 1 or 2 1-drops, like that kind of normal curve is way too slow. Like, you need to be much faster than that to be like at the midpoint even, or even to be like a deck that's a little bit above the midpoint. It's just a very tempo heavy meta right now. And Warlocks, about 3 out of 4 Warlocks I've seen were Zoo Warlocks with like 1 board clear at most. I can't remember. I have not seen in this new meta a Warlock yet that has played more than 1 board clear, which is crazy. So
Cool.
yeah, that's kind of the meta update. I don't really know what to say about it. The meta was already very tempo. Now it's even more tempo. That's not a good thing. I am really annoyed at mages, like in general. And there are much more mages now than there were before, even though mages were only like somewhat buffed. So the top 3 of the top 4 classes by win rate right now all have secrets. That really annoys me. I just kind of hate playing against secrets in general. And especially if you're tempo, like, and the whole game is tempo, and there's a secret, it's it's not actually like that skillful to play around because it's often just like, well, if they have that secret, I'm dead, and that secret comes out on potentially turn like 3 or 4 or 5, and you already know that if they played a particular secret, then the game is over and you have lost. It's just there's too many of those kinds of moments, and that's always what happens when you get too tempo heavy, right? That's one of the reasons why Blizzard really pulled back from tempo like 3 years ago, and now in the last like this year so far, they've like kind of gone back into the tempo world from a constructive perspective, and it's bleeding over to the arena side. But without Ashes of Outlands and Skullman's Academy, we were always at risk of going back to something that was too tempo. And now with these adjusts, it's gotten like even more tempo. So yeah, too much tempo.
Yeah, arena. Whoa.
Okay, so that's it for the arena portion. Let's talk about the battlegrounds because we have some changes in battlegrounds.
We have some changes. I'm not gonna go on a whole sort of spiel about it because look, soon TM Copium big BG changes are coming. We don't know exactly when. I was expecting end of this month, but we're kind of at the end of the month, and I don't think who knows. They might surprise us with it very soon. But we have some changes in the recent patch as well. But once again, the big changes, the 30 minion rework, like Battlegrounds 2.0, essentially, that is still upcoming. But for this patch, what they did was they changed a lot of heroes, which I think was super necessary. So, number one, Shutterwalk is back. Shutterwalk has a new hero power. It is a 0-cost hero power that you can use twice. And it does this. Adds a 1/1 Shutterling to your hand that repeats all battle cries you've played. Twice per game you can get this Shutterling, and the Shutterling just replays all the battle cries you've had that game. It's such a unique, interesting, skill testing hero power because you got to remember everything that you have done, everything that you've bought, especially when it comes to tokens. Like when it comes to tokens, when it comes to, oh wait, did I play a Murzon as well? Did I play an Amalgadon? How many homunculuses have I played? You got to track a lot. But I would say the most skill testing is planning out your turns, especially when there's double tokens in and you're trying to do tokens and just do that one pop off turn. Uh, Super cool. Right now in the HS replay stats, Shutterwalk is very good. For the top 1%, which is 10k MMR or higher, Shutterwalk is number 4. It is basically Hook Tusk level. We all know how good Hook Tusk is. So Shutterwalk wins a lot of games, but sometimes you can crash and burn a little bit, and we've talked about before exactly how skill testing it is. So the fact that it is even for top 1% players, that's very, very good.
This is like such an
Next,
awkwardly designed power.
it is so hard to master and such a weird one for me to even just like turn plan, right? I've seen a lot of good players play Shutterwalk, and the amount of stuff that they have to remember and the amount that they need to process, because it's not just remembering, oh, all these battle cries, it's remembering, okay, with all these in mind, how do I maximize its effects? When you get tokens in and when you get tripling and then all of that stuff.
Yeah, that I'm less concerned with, but like it's also a Shutterling. Like you also have to play it onto the board, and you
You
can
also have to
hold it
play
into your hand after you hero power. Such a weird design choice.
It is incredibly skill testing, so which is a good thing. I will see where this kind of ends up and where the community ends up with their thoughts on this. And this is also a hero that, because the shuttling depends so much on battle cries, it kind of doesn't matter how good Shutterwalk is right now. Let's see what they do with all of the minions, because this hero power is directly tied to
Yeah.
all of the available battle cries in the game, and with a 30 minion plus rework coming, who knows, right? But super interesting, super cool. We when they took away Shutterlock, we knew that just wasn't going to work. Like that hero was never good. It was only funny sometimes to do meme things with Pogo Hopper. You guys remember Pogo that Jandis ruined? But before Jandis, there was the occasional Shutterlock Pogo Hopper. F's in chat, please remember. But I like the rework. It's interesting at the very least. Whoever thought of this really thought a lot about this. This
Hmm.
is not one that you just like
This has
kind
been
of
heavily tested. There's no way this came out
yeah.
like someone's head. This had to have gone
And
through like 6 iterations before they came to this.
it's such a dangerous concept. Like it's such a Pandora's box
Hmm.
thing. But I like it. They're taking risks. It's cool. As of right now, it's very powerful, but the amount of planning that you have to do, it feels very rewarding if you do get to master it. So that's cool. Now let's get to the new number one hero. Ooh, based on HS replay stats for the top 1%. It's Daryl now. Wow, our favorite Dancing Froggo. They buffed Daryl to give random minions in the shop 3 hats instead of 2 when you sell. So it's now just this strict 50% bonus, which is great. Remember, we talked like a year and a half ago, and we said if
Hmm.
Daryl is ever not at least one of the better heroes in the game, we have a problem.
Hmm.
And then Daryl fell way, like you couldn't pick him. Daryl was
Hmm.
unpickable, and we're like, okay,
Because
well
we
the
had
power
a
level,
problem.
we
It's
had a
like
problem.
Caltheus. Like, these are things that should not ever go below the median, or else you've changed fundamental things of how these games work. And you
And yeah,
have.
BG's has been fundamentally changed. All these crazy hero powers, all of these pop off potential combos. So Blizzard had to adjust. You either had to nerf everything, or you just had to say, Daryl, we're just giving you more hats.
Here's here.
And
So here's the
Daryl
thing
right
with
now,
okay. Before we
yeah.
get into the
So Daryl
specifics of Daryl,
right now is in tier 1 by himself. He stands alone. Now he still never wins games, as in he wins or gets first place about 8% of the time, which is not that high. But in typical Daryl fashion, Daryl just dominates the top 4. Like gets second, third, and fourth at an obscene rate. You just sacrifice the number 1 ranking, but with Daryl, you also like never get 8th or 7th or 6th. So he's back to doing Daryl things. You just stay on tier 4. Mechs are your best friend. You can get Hydras as well. Like Hydras and mechs are your best friends on tier 4. And then you kind of just get into the top 4 and you die to the crazy menagerie, or you die to the crazy, like quadruple Caligos build. There's no shame in that. But we're back to Daryl being what it is, and I'm here for it. I love it.
ugh, like what? So the design wise, what they've done is they've opened up the design space at the top. You can tell it went from 2 to 3. So literally, there's been an average power creep of like plus 50% at the very top, because Daryl was at the very top in the very beginning. So since the launch of the game, it's plus 50% of a power creep, and it's like power creeping in games isn't inevitable, especially if they can keep reworking hero powers. But they're running out of like interesting design space, and one of the issues with trying to make like low mana things, or really most hero powers would qualify as this, is if you're trying to make a card and you're trying to create and balance a lot of them, but they all have to be 0 mana cards. That's a freaking impossible task. If they all had to be 2 mana cards or 1 mana cards, that's really hard, because a lot of them you'll want to make 1.25 mana for balance reasons, if nothing else. Also for design reasons, right? Let's say I want to give something a banana, or sorry, a hat. Well, a hat's +1/+1, so I can only give 1 hat or 2 hat, right? Like I could make it give 50% of a hat, like, sometimes, right? Like, but that's not intuitive, and that's not as fun, and then you're introducing RNG that you really don't want sometimes. Not that Daryl would care, because Daryl's all RNG. uh, but you just open up a lot more design space when you kind of go bigger. Now the problem, and why you don't just start there, because you can easily just start there. You didn't have to start where Battlegrounds started. Is that now swings are going to be huge. Whenever you increase the power of stuff, even if everything's balanced, swings are going to be big. So when the hero power hits, the hero power hits really hard. When the hero power doesn't hit, you will then just lose to everybody whose hero power has hit. Like, and that's not a skill thing. Whenever swings are large, skill goes down more. Skill impact goes down more. So the entire direction of Battlegrounds is to add complexity, because you have more design space to create this complexity, and you're just like adding more heroes and more units and more stuff. So you've added a lot of complexity, but at the same time, on a fundamental level, you're lowering the skill. So the complexity has to make up for the lower amount of fundamentals. And so a lot of things like knowing the meta, knowing how each specific heroes and their nuances, and dealing with how they deal with minions, and then whenever they update a shop, like that changes. All of that becomes more important, which is to say memorization and just kind of like knowing stuff, right? Game sense becomes
skill
much
is
more
more
important.
hero specific.
Yeah.
The skill in BGs is becoming much more hero specific, whereas you still need the foundational tools and the knowledge and the game sense. But for example, I think Kurtrus is one of those heroes that you obviously need to know the game, get a sense of tempo and everything. But Kurtrus is one of those where you just like, you got to play the hero a few times. You got to know exactly how it operates, the best ways to activate your hero power, when to activate it based on the shop and the tribe. So yeah, you're building up your kind of like Kurtrus toolbox with these fundamentals, but you really just got to know how to play Kurtrus.
Mm-hmm.
And with the complexity here, if we're talking about something like a Shutterwalk, something like a Jandis or a Hook Tusk, these are some of the top heroes in the game, and yeah, like it is very complex. So they've shifted skill from generalized kind of like, oh, okay, this is when like it's generally good to level. Oh, I need to like really do the scouting, and that's like the biggest part of the game. It's still a part of the game, but a lot of it is like, all right, turn planning for Jandis specifically, turn planning, doing the best odds for Hook Tusk, and then doing that for Shutterwalk as well. So I think the three of these heroes are similar, and you can bucket them in a similar way, because the possibilities and your big playmaking potential for these three, which are right now 4, 5, and 6 on the rankings, and I would say they're higher in the hands of the highest skill level players: Shutterwalk, Hook Tusk, and Barov. With these three heroes, so similar in that it's like, if you play them perfectly, you can pop off so hard with them, but it is a little bit more specific now to them. It wasn't like a lot of the heroes a year and a half ago, which were very similar. It's more about your knowledge of BGs. And yeah, hero powers, you sprinkle them in, you did stuff with them, but it's like, oh, right, I get some extra stats with Edwin.
Yeah.
With Yogg, I get to level a little bit differently from everyone, right? Like you get to level a little bit differently. Isn't that cool? And now everyone levels very differently. Even like heroes that are trying to pop off, like you see more heroes staying on one and either doing like the for lack of better terms, the people a lot of the players call it like the Chinese curve, right? Like the Chinese curve, where you like level twice on turn 7. People do the Reform curve, which we all know, but things are getting really weird. And is it still skill testing? Yes, but now you just gotta kind of know this stuff. Like if you don't know that the Chinese curve exists, if you don't know about all of the intricate ways to play this specific character, you're going to fall behind. Meanwhile, like a year ago, if you played Edwin pretty well, can you just pick up Yogg and understand a lot about what makes Yogg good? Yeah, you can. You can still do that, but the carryover is much smaller, and it'll take you a little longer for you to really pick it up
It'll take you a
because
lot longer. There's way
the
more
Venn
heroes
diagram,
now,
yeah,
and
the
they're
overlap
yeah,
in the Venn
it's
diagram is much smaller now.
so your skill as far as like a skill floor that's required to like actually play the game has gone up. But swing doesn't just like swing is not about complexity. The complexity is added separately, right? The fact that they created this swing because they are upping all the power level and giving themselves more room to play with. And to, in theory, keep things balanced, at least statistically. That's what's causing the complexity. And the complexity can create different kinds of skill. But fundamentally, the swing is still there, which means all RNG effects that you are presented with within the game, and it's Battlegrounds. It's like, anything else. There's a lot of RNG just built into the game, gets amplified more because that's what swing does. Swing amplifies RNG and then erases RNG. And so, at a fundamental level, no matter what amount of complexity you are building into these heroes, you can't get away from, and this is why it's called the physics of the game. The physics of the game has been fundamentally altered so that skill impact, as determined, like I'm counting like the skill impact of like generally having good strategy, right? Once you hit a skill floor of being able to manage the complexity in like an okay way, not talking about the skill like your swings itself would have lowered the ability for your skill above the floor to impact the results of the game against someone who's roughly in like a roughly equal skill level. It's impacted that because you're raising 150%. It's going to impact that by roughly the same percentage, and that's like if you're wondering why people don't just like why game designers don't just give themselves more room to design stuff, that's why. It's because the more room you give yourself to design stuff, you can design stuff. One, it gets more complicated, which is not a good game design thing. But even if you want it to be more complicated, it has knock-on effects on skill. Like if my opponent is doing something crazy because the RNG got amplified by his now better hero power, and my more moderate RNG result in this game got amplified by my also more powerful hero power, but my RNG just wasn't like as good. Now that amplification of difference is much harder to mitigate with fundamentals. Like that's the point of fundamentals, is to be able to allow you to switch paces, is be able to allow you to basically like lose less when you're losing. Right? Like that's the point of fundamentals. And you're going to get less of that from the perspective of hero powers. Now, what they're trying to do to make up for it is they're trying to make the tribes play more with each other and the neutral set to serve more of a purpose rather than the initial game where the neutral set did nothing and the tribes were pretty independent from each other. So by connecting all of those, they're trying to roughly keep the fundamental skill level at around the same place while giving themselves the extra room. So it's really interesting to see that come together because in theory, Battlegrounds, like not talking about complexity, but just strategy wise, Battlegrounds should have become a much more strategic game because of all the crap that they've been adding in and the frankly much better neutrals and much more like cohesive tribes that they've been introducing and much more interaction. And the effects have been kind of uneven, and it's because they're using it. Like their goal isn't to make the game more strategic. Their goal is to be able to build up that kind of like extra pool, right? Like think like I worked out and I burned 200 calories. Well, now I can eat 200 more calories. That's Blizzard's philosophy with Battlegrounds. So they're not trying to make the game more skillful, but they're trying to strike that balance where every time they create more room, that they then use it to make things bigger, and so that to make things more like part of it is complexity, part of it is just like coolness, right? To make more interesting powers.
All right. Couple other things. So we got changes to 3 other heroes. Flurgle, which still sucks, unfortunately, now gets it adds a random Murloc to Bob's Tavern after you sell any minion, not just a Murloc. So it's better. It's definitely better. It unfortunately still sucks according to stats. Am I going to play it? I sure am. That's the
That looks
Florgle
like a
thing.
huge upgrade in hero power.
Well, yeah, it's a huge upgrade. You just didn't know how bad Florgle was before
Oh,
that.
okay.
I mean, it is a huge upgrade. And Florgle has always been one of those heroes that I think people, or that the stats didn't reflect exactly how good it was. But it's still not great. That's the problem with it. It's still not fantastic. Okay, Maiev now gets +2/+2 instead of just +1/+1. It's okay now.
Yay.
It's okay.
Well, it can get +4/+4, and it would not be not okay.
It would be better, much better.
Yeah, but I just mean
uh,
it wouldn't like
it
be
wouldn't
like in
break
the
the
top
game.
tier. Yeah, like that's what I mean. Like it wouldn't be top tier if it was +4
I
plus
don't know.
four. So yeah, they buffed it to +2/+2. If they want later on, especially if there's been more power creep, they could buff it to +3/+3.
Maiev right now is about Alakir or Galakrond level, so it's like tier 2. It's solid tier 2,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. If it was +4/+4, it would actually be good. Just because that is a lot of stats. But anyways, Malghost now can use his hero power twice a turn instead of just once a turn.
Yay!
Yay! It's cool.
Yeah,
You can do a few things. And Malagos right now is about as good as Millhouse. So once again,
nice.
tier 2. Solid tier 2. It's okay.
All right. Any thoughts? Like overall?
I thought overall it was a good change. The one thing that really makes me feel good about BGs is every single BG patch, even if the changes don't exactly play out the way that I want it to, or even the way that Blizzard may want it to play out to, um, I think most of the patches at least identify some of the issues with the game, and they're working towards um, a, game state, I'll call it, that is better than it was before. So I like it. And once again, I'm just really excited for the rework because I think what they're going to
Mm-hmm.
do, and they've hinted at it as well. A lot of people think, for example, Hogger is going to be gone. And I think that's a good thing, right? Like a lot of people are anticipating Hogger is going to be gone. And I think that there's a lot of minions and just a lot like some play styles which I believe they had visions for and just kind of got away from them, or it just didn't work out the way they wanted it to. And I anticipate that BGs is going to be so much more cohesive after
Mm-hmm.
this big change. And I like these changes. Like, Daryl was always going to kind of suck if they didn't do anything. They could either take Daryl out, they could change his hero power actually, right? Like giving fractions is not something that Blizzard really does. It's also very inelegant. So I agree with Blizzard that like
50% chance to get a hat. It's
yeah,
RNG
exactly.
anyway, right? Like,
Yeah, definitely. Or yeah, just keep the old hero power, but whenever you sell a minion, you also have, how about this? A 10% chance on top of that to give it like +9/+9.
sure. Just like make a huge chart of like the amount of hats that your minion gets. It could get one hat, it could get two hats, it could get three hats. Just, give it a lot of hats.
Yeah. I'm sure people would love that. I mean, you would see the videos of suddenly it's like turn 3 and there's like a 30/30 minion because they just hit like the
Mm-hmm.
0.01%.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I mean that's so what they did with Daryl, I don't exactly mind. Like, we can talk about all this power creep. Look, there's going to be power creep, and now Daryl is on top, and I think anytime the number one hero is a hero that doesn't get number one a lot, but kind of stabilizes that. I like that. I like when something like Daryl is up there. Daryl is definitely more skillful, in my opinion, than a hero like Cthulhu. When Cthulhu was at the top of the meta,
Oh god,
or when
Cthulhu.
Wag Toggle was at the
Wait, did they
top of the
change
meta,
Cthulhu?
huh?
Did they change Cthulhu? No, right?
No.
So
Cthulhu was
he's
like
still like okay.
Cthulhu is still there. I mean, Cthulhu is the same as Omu, which is good,
Mm.
right? Like Omu is good. Cthulhu is good. But yeah, Cthulhu is no longer at the very top. And that just makes sense. Now you have Daryl with a 50% increase, right? It's like, why would I pick Cthulhu? Especially because Cthulhu has basically no flexibility when it
Yep.
comes to minions. Daryl does. Like there is actually quite a lot of stuff that you can do with Daryl in terms of choosing the minion. You can take some rolls, you can do some stuff. Like you can use Daryl's hero power to kind of just bridge your way. You can just use it for tempo to actually
Hmm.
find an endgame build. You could just do some middle stuff and then pop off later on. With Cthulhu, you have none of that. Like your minions are basically your end minions. You're buffing them. Your amount of rolls is so limited. Meanwhile, Daryl has a lot of options, and then you can do these synergies and everything. Also, your chances of getting like any sort of cleave online with Daryl is pretty easy, as long as beasts are in. Your chances of getting a cleave online with Cthulhu is pretty non-existent. Like the amount of times that you're able to see a cleave with Cthulhu, it just doesn't work out because of the curve.
Hmm.
And then of course it's luck, right? A lot of it is luck based. So yeah, I'm happy with it. Like overall, I'm happy with at least what they're identifying and the direction that they're taking. And they didn't even have to do this. Just the fact that they knew that BGs needed BGs 2.0 and they previewed the Pirates. And with that, a lot of people are guessing, and I'm with them. Like the assumption is just like, okay, we're showing you Pirates for a reason because Pirates is
They suck.
either the
They,
number
they are
one
broken. They are
or
literally running by a bug.
yeah, yeah. Like the pirate tribe is it doesn't work. It
Hmm.
just doesn't work. You either have scam comp, which is not
Not a
pirates,
real
it's
comp.
Khadgar. It's
Hmm.
Khadgar comp. It's a Khadgar comp. It's not a real pirate comp, right? Khadgar Baron is like those are the stars of the comp. That's what really makes it tick. Um, and then you have like Hogger Infinite Pirates, but that's I don't think that's something that Blizzard loves. You know, it's part of the reason that they got rid of the big Khadgar brand transitions and they changed the way that stuff triples onto the board. So I'm happy with it. I'm very happy with the way that they're going, and I just can't wait until I see more with it. They're obviously not going to do the same thing with Arena, so I'm just holding out hope for the actual game mode that they are putting work into.
Nice. Yeah. All right. That's it for the Hearthstone stuff. I want to do a question from the goat, just because, as you can tell from my metaphors in this episode, it's on my mind, and it's on your mind, or it's on my mind because I'm starving. But I am on a starvation diet right now, and I thought it was interesting. I've been on this for almost 3 weeks now, not quite 3 weeks. But we're getting close to it, and I've been losing 2 to 3 pounds a week, as medically recommended, of the most weight you can lose in a week without it being like unhealthy somehow. So that's kind of what I was targeting. Um, I had I had slipped past the BMI line into obesity, which I know the BMI is a terrible judgment, but just that line, I was like, all right, it's probably actually time to stop eating 100% junk and literally not caring at all about, anything else. I've probably done that for like, God, like 3 years running, maybe 4 years, maybe. It's been a while since I thought about what I was eating or exercise, and I still haven't started exercising, and I don't plan to. That's too much. But I have tried to get below the BMI line, and I did. It's like 203 for my height, and I had gone to like 206 after a fat trip to DC and New York and New Jersey. So once I got back, I was like, all right, it's time to button down. And yeah, I'm gonna keep it up until I get to around like 185 maybe before I stop, let it rebound a little. So that's my plan. And the diet is just a really easy diet. Just whenever I'm thinking of eating something, I just eat half as much as I would normally eat. And so then you cut your calories by half, which most people shouldn't do. But like I was probably consuming like 3-4 thousand calories easily every day. So cutting it by half was like just kind of a good move. But I haven't changed what I've eaten mostly, except I eat a lot more salads now, just because it's really hard to eat like half a sandwich and like keep the other half in the fridge, and then it gets like terrible. But yeah, we still go
Just
out.
make smaller sandwiches.
Yeah, like I mean, the bread. It's just logistically, it's just so much easier to do salads for. And I probably eat like 4 salads a week now, up from like 0. But most of my diet is still like burritos and pizza and hamburgers and all that normal stuff. Because they're what tastes good. I just eat less of it. Like if I would normally have 2 slices of pizza, I just have 1 slice now. It's fine. 1 slice of pizza is like 600 calories. Like it's really fine for a meal. So I don't know. Maybe that'll help some of you other fat asses out there try to lose some weight. I am hungry like most of the day though, which kind of sucks. But I do have more energy because I'm hungry though. Like you get a lot of energy when you're hungry. Like people are always like, "Oh no, you're hungry. You must have like no energy." Like, yeah, I guess I would have less energy if I was like trying to do hard labor or something and I was starving. Like that probably doesn't mix so well. But like I'm sitting in front of a computer, like doing white collar work. Like my body is like get some food, and so it's giving me a lot of mental energy so that I could go and find some food, and I don't, but I use the energy, so that's pretty good. Bad for sleep. Good for doing stuff.
All right.
Just thought I'd
I
update
have nothing
people.
to add. I have nothing to add to that.
You have
We
nothing
can
to
just
add
end
to
on that.
the starvation
No,
diet?
I'm gonna.
All right.
No, I'm gonna leave it at that.
All right. That's it from us. We'll catch you here next week. Until then, this is Adwicta.
This is Merp. See ya.